is he really an elite quarterback, or is it just the situation he's in?
No, he's not an elite quarterback. He's a product of the system.
The Niners' biggest weakness, if you have to pinpoint one, is their quarterback.
The rise of an unlikely hero in late 2022 captured the attention of NFL fans everywhere, with a former Mr. Irrelevant being thrown into action as the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers.
Brock Purdy in at quarterback. Underdog got one more step.
Brock at quarterback.
What a challenge for young Brock Purdy.
Mr. Irrelevant to many, he becomes extremely relevant now.
The way in which former Iowa State quarterback Brock Purdy commanded himself was impressive and didn't even slightly resemble that of a 7th-round rookie with zero experience in the league.
Doing what he does, where he does it, with the people he does it with, he's a top 5 quarterback. Not only is he a top 5 quarterback, he's a top 2 MVP candidate. Brock Purdy is elite. Brock Purdy standing across from Dak Prescott, I 100% said to myself, I'd take Brock Purdy over Dak Prescott.
Fast forward to the 2023 postseason, and a lot of fans have turned on Purdy. Perhaps he's just insanely overrated.
Final 4 quarterbacks are Lamar Jackson, about to be MVP for the second time, fastest quarterback ever. Patrick Mahomes, a wizard. Number 1 pick Jared Goff, and the last guy picked in a draft, Brock Purdy. I've seen this with San Francisco before. Better scheme, better roster, average quarterback, and they don't hold a trophy.
Propped up by the talent around him, in which can be the ideal situation for any quarterback in his given situation. I mean, the age-old story applies directly to this scenario with the mainstream media and NFL diehard fans. If you shove something down their throats long enough, like Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes in their greatness, or hell, even Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, they're going to get sick of it eventually. And in doing so, they're gonna turn against them. Like, don't get me wrong, Brock Purdy's success story and everything, it started out great. Everybody loved it, but I think they might have just overdone it a little bit. The week before he came into the Miami Dolphins game in week 13 of the 2022 season, at least 90% of the NFL's audience had never heard of him. Purdy went into that season as the team's 3rd stringer behind newly named starter Trey Lance and veteran Jimmy Garoppolo. Lance had been granted the opportunity to start for the 49ers that season, but a broken ankle in week 2 cut that dream short. And 3 months later, Garoppolo was ruled out against the Dolphins with a foot injury. So seemingly out of nowhere, the Niners now had to turn to a 7th-round rookie out of Iowa State who had been passed on by the entire league until the very last pick of the draft. I mean, and even looking at him when he was first starting, there wasn't really anything amazing about him. He had average size, average arm talent, and even average mobility. But when he got in the game, he really showed what he could do. And I mean, the following week, the media headlines were endless about him. Purdy was going to get his first NFL start against none other than Tom Brady. And honestly, the people who thought that the NFL might be scripted had a little bit of a case here. All the media could talk about was Mr. Irrelevant versus the 199th pick. Nobody talks about Tom Brady without reminding us that he was an overlooked 6th-round pick, and now we had the 2022 version of him emerging in San Francisco.
There's many blue chippers who've had success in the league. There's been as many and often more who were not that. We're not the number 1 prospect coming out of their high school. We're not the number 1 guy coming out of college and the first pick in the draft. You know, obviously you know about Tom. 198 different options to take him. Joe Montana was the same way. It was passed up by a ton of people. For as many Peyton Manning, first pick in the drafts, there's been a ton of these other guys. And what it does is create this chip.
At least so we were told. But to understand the media hype about Brock Purdy and why it's so ridiculous, we have to talk about the situation that he landed in. Many rookie quarterbacks are thrust onto bad teams with a lack of talent around them and an offensive line that can't block to save their lives. And don't get me wrong, it's all good and well to admire a kid that's coming into the league as a rookie. He's going on a winning streak. But at some point, we have to be real here. Like, first off, Brock Purdy landed on a team that's coached by Kyle Shanahan. one of the greatest offensive minds of all time. He has an insane resume of building quarterbacks and building offenses, including the 49ers. Like hell, he made Jimmy Garoppolo look like an all-pro. He's often labeled a genius and a generational head coach. Stemming from his father's now famous coaching tree, Shanahan makes life comfortable for his players and extremely difficult for opposition defenses. There's a reason that 3 of his assistant coaches have gone on to be head coaches in the NFL. Robert Saleh, Mike McDaniel, and DeMeco Ryans all came from the Shanahan tree, and all respect and appreciate the greatness of the Niners head coach. Like, I think everybody forgets that he was the offensive mind behind the 2016 Atlanta Falcons team that led the NFL in scoring and got them all the way to that Super Bowl. And since taking over the 49ers, he's led them to the NFC Championship game 4 times now and a Super Bowl in which he played Patrick Mahomes and damn near should have won the game, but Jimmy Garoppolo again cost them that. Like, he was giving Jimmy Garoppolo opportunities to put up career numbers while he was in that offense. He couldn't deliver in the biggest moment when he needed him to. Like, even before that, Jimmy Garoppolo still was putting up remotely good numbers in the 2021 season, also under Kyle Shanahan. In New England, and more recently in Las Vegas, he's a very average quarterback. And honestly, besides that 1 year in San Francisco, on either side of it of that 2019 year, Jimmy Garoppolo really hasn't done anything. The only other season that he looked like remotely a competent quarterback was when he was in 2021, which was also under Kyle Shanahan. In New England, and even more recently in Vegas, he's not even a starter anymore. He doesn't look even like an NFL quarterback now. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Brock Purdy's bad, but he's just not this quarterback messiah that everybody's putting him out to be. And like, it's not even particularly close. Like, there is such a huge benefit to having Kyle Shanahan as his head coach, who built a monumental offense that is absolutely shredding defenses right now. And it's that attracts personnel to want to play inside this offense. George Kittle and Deebo Samuel have been in San Francisco for several years now, but more recently, the team added the likes of Brandon Ayuk via the draft and both Christian McCaffrey and tackle Trent Williams via trade. And like, while we're building this big perspective right now, like, this is gonna sound crazy, but it should also be noted that those position players, Deebo, CMC, Kittle, and Brandon Ayuk, have 10 All-Pro and 9 Pro Bowl selections between all of them. 2 were first-round picks, 1 was a second-rounder, and the other one is one of the best generational tight ends we have ever seen play the game of football. Oh yeah, and when you add in the Hall of Fame left tackle that's going to be blocking his blind side, who's also opening up enormous lanes for their all-pro running back to run through, it's pretty safe to say that the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers has got a pretty easy job there. The 49ers traded a 5th-rounder in 2020 and a 3rd in 2021 for Trent Williams. Less than a year later, they signed him to a 6-year, $138 million deal, making him the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL. You don't pay a man that kind of money unless he's doing some serious work in your offense. So Brock Purdy has 4 All-Pros to throw the ball to, and the most expensive tackle to block his blind side. He literally has nothing but time and nothing but talent around him. The argument is that you could put any capable quarterback in there, and with enough time to learn the playbook and the progressions, they would be able to succeed. Now, while we might be overhyping Purdy's on-field talent somewhat, there is absolutely no denying that his preparation is second to none. Who else prepared at an outrageous, obsessive level? Tom Brady. When Purdy got his first win over Brady in his first very career start, the 49ers personnel and the stars of the team were extremely quick to let the public know they weren't the slightest bit surprised. George Kittle was one of the biggest advocates for Purdy's level of preparation, and multiple players commented on his dedication to the playbook. When you know it's at that level of obsession, you're going to be ready when the clock strikes and your moment arrives. Quarterbacks are often subject to the situation they land in. Take Bryce Young, for example. We've already labeled him a bust, but he's landed on a team with a shockingly poor offensive line, a 33-year-old Adam Thielen as his only reliable wide receiver, and an offensive staff that was fired halfway through their first season with the team. By all accounts, the Carolina Panthers are a complete mess right now, and any quarterback is going to struggle in that scenario. But hell, if we swapped Bryce Young to the Niners right now, Would he succeed? Maybe. And would Brock Purdy lead the Carolina Panthers to the NFC Championship game? Yeah, I highly doubt that. The San Francisco 49ers couldn't be more polar opposite. Everything is perfectly set up for the franchise to compete, and the cost of Brock Purdy's contract means that they can afford to load up on guys like Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey without having to worry about the expense of their quarterback for multiple years to come. We haven't even gotten into the defense yet. Once again, the 49ers are in a such privileged position that they're able to go out and make flashy moves like trading a third-round pick for Chase Young with the potential that he becomes a long-term piece for the 49ers defense. They have one of the greatest pass rushers in the game right now in Nick Bosa, and that's just the beginning of it. Their front seven includes interior linemen with stunning depth, namely Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, and newly acquired Javon Hargrave, who pinned an $84 million free agency contract in the spring. Then you have Bosa, Chase Young, and Randy Gregory coming off of the edge, plus one of the most commanding linebacker duos in the NFL via Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. Now, I would argue that their secondary does need a little bit of work, and it's probably the weakest part of that defensive unit, but I mean, as a whole, they are incredibly difficult to play against. The Niners boast the third best run defense in football this season, behind only the Chicago Bears and Detroit Lions. They barely allow 92 rushing yards a game, and their ability against the run often forces opposition offenses into third and long situations. The pass defense hasn't been quite as effective though, but in the final two games of the regular season, in the playoff game against the Packers, they averaged 169 passing yards allowed on average. That's going to win you football games, and that's the argument the naysayers are making against Brock Purdy following the win over the Green Bay Packers. Many, including myself, believe that the 49ers won that game in spite of their quarterback and not because of him. Like, so many people were eager to go see him and put a performance on in a playoff game, but he just didn't do that, and he didn't have his best stuff all night against the Packers. I mean, he was literally a check down machine to Christian McCaffrey all game long. On several occasions, Purdy overthrew, threw behind, or flat out missed his spot, and the Packers had multiple opportunities to capitalize on those errant throws. I mean, he was just fortunate he didn't get picked off that night. And luckily, he cleaned up his play just in the nick of time so he could put together a methodical fourth quarter drive and lead them to win the game. And I'll give credit where credit's due. I mean, he did give some good throws while he was in the red zone, at which point they leaned over their run game and found a way to get Christian McCaffrey into the end zone on an inside run almost completely untouched. Like, I mean, there is no doubt that Brock Purdy played some of the worst football we've seen from him in the playoffs. And had it not been for the stops and the forced turnovers on Jordan Love, the 49ers might have gone home in their 2023 season playoff debut. I mean, remember when Cam Newton caught all that slack for calling guys like Tua Tagovailoa, Brock Purdy, and Dak Prescott game managers? Hey, I mean, he might have been onto something. Like, hey, the dude spent a decade in the league and he won an MVP. He might know a little bit about what he's talking about. Like, I mean, hell, Tua and Dak both got bounced in their first round game, and Purdy really just didn't look that impressive in his own game either. So, I mean, like, Cam might have been talking about something. And in all honesty, I think that the 49ers got really lucky and that the Packers should have just won that game. Like, I mean, even after that late score, Jordan Love still had more than enough time to go and put together a game-winning drive, but instead, he got rushed out of the pocket and opted to just throw across his body, and I don't know what he was thinking. The Niners have been a little fortunate in 2023 anyways, and perhaps they're one of the most overrated teams in the league this season. I mean, they beat a lot of cupcake teams, especially in their division. Like, I mean, the Cardinals and Seahawks practically just handed over 4 free wins. And then they went on to beat teams like the Jets, the Giants, the Jaguars. Like, that's barely even inspiring to go and beat those teams week in and week out. Sure, wins over the Eagles and the Cowboys, that does look good on their record, but largely when they faced those better teams on their slate, they just really didn't show up. They were humiliated by the Baltimore Ravens, who they could easily face in the Super Bowl, lost to the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns, and even the Minnesota Vikings beat them earlier in the year. This team isn't untouchable. And if Brock Purdy just can't go out there and lead the offense and just is throwing balls overhead and just terrible passes, then honestly, they might be in a little bit of trouble. Cam Newton stated that being a game manager isn't necessarily a bad thing. He wasn't knocking the quarterbacks he mentioned by saying it, but that we have to accept that that's exactly what some quarterbacks are going to be. Drew Brees was an elite game manager, so was Eli Manning. Both of those guys won Super Bowls. Brock Purdy falls into that category. If you took the talent around him away in the perfectly laid out scheme and the generational head coach, what are you left with? Could Purdy do it in a far less fortunate situation? He absolutely needs the circumstances around him to fall into place in order to be successful. And that's totally fine, but let's call a spade a spade. Or on the flip side, should he even be criticized at all for just landing in the situation that he's in? Like, I mean, is the hatred just all the jealousy built up of pretty much like other fan bases just wishing that their quarterback could be just like as blessed as Brock Purdy is with all the all-pro talent around him, the generational coach, all of that? Is it just pure jealousy? Perhaps we're being a little too harsh on Brock Purdy. Perhaps he's simply finding his feet in the NFL and is going to have a bad game here and there as a young quarterback, like anybody else. He could go on to have a decade-long career, or perhaps even longer, effectively managing games, getting a couple of contract extensions, and leading the 49ers to a couple of Super Bowl potential seasons along the way. Or, as the talent falls away, or the salary cap catches up to them, maybe we see Brock Purdy for what he always was, a 7th round draft pick with a mediocre level of talent at the next level. So who's wrong and right? You guys tell me down in the comment section below. And as always, I appreciate you guys. If you made it this far, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers. I appreciate you guys more than you know. Thank you, and I will catch you guys in the next one.